hype train, full speed ahead. Choo choo, baby, that's what they said. More reactors, more mistakes. When it derails, guess who pays?
It's a song's called Small Modular Reactor, SMR, Hype Train. I'll play the video for you at the end of the show. Man, that thing's got such a great beat to it, eh? That's crazy. And you can find that at James Lucid's site on YouTube. You'll find links in my description. I'm Dana. Welcome. You can call in at 709-589-4406. I've taken the oregano oil, and it seems I get a little bit of heartburn when I take the oregano oil. It can't be a coincidence at this stage, I don't think. I'll have to try to get another oregano oil, see if I can get around it. My trusty old braid here to get me out of it if it gets too bad. It's the 27th of February 2023, last show of February 2025. Did I say 2023? 2025. These are live shows, so you know. Small modular reactors. I'm in Canada if you want to call in. So we got a poll tonight asking a simple question. Are the stocks for non-existent small modular reactors a Ponzi scheme used to loot unsuspecting investors? And this was cooked up at International Atomic Energy Agency, United Nations, at the Conference of Parties. It's really special how sadistic these people actually are. Portable reactors, nuclear reactors / small modular reactors, are now available for your home. Did you know that? It's not true. That's nano nuclear energy. They really are the lowest forms of life, aren't they? The small modular reactor companies. Claiming that they got small modular reactors are mobile on top of that. Portable nuclear reactors, like generators, Dana. That's one of them there. Look, that's what they're claiming exists. It doesn't exist. That's a rendition of it. This is not even a reactor. They don't actually have, they haven't even tried to build a reactor. CEO James Walker, a perpetual scumbag, I noticed. Nano nuclear energy. Anything to do with a small modular reactor, just going to steal your money. That's what they're up to. And this was cooked up. They have the 14 biggest financial institutes on the planet. And they're up on TV with Fox Business. At the very end of the show, the host, not this sack of shit right there, but the host says you don't have any at the current time. Is that correct? And Walker finally says, yeah, we don't have one right now, but we're getting there. So make sure he doesn't say make sure you invest, but that's the implications, right? How can you not despise these types of people? They're baiting people into buying stocks in a company that doesn't have a product. So there's no way they're going to make their money back or make any money off it. And they're going to lose money because the 14 biggest financial institutes have cooked up a scheme where they buy stocks in Nano, NUSCALE, and, well, I was going to say UltraSafe, but UltraSafe is bankrupt. NUSCALE has class action lawsuits against them because he ripped off all the investors. Bear with me. You just can't keep up with with the scumbaggery from this industry. We're going to cover small modular reactors tonight, quite a few stories, because every 2 or 3 weeks there's a big push. And what's going on is the 14 biggest financial institutes in North America, probably worldwide, will buy shares for a week or two in these small modular reactor companies that don't have a product. It artificially seems like the company's legit because the stocks went up 5 or 6 million shares. So if you're an investor, that says buy all over it, right? And so you'll take your hard-earned money and invest in this Ponzi scheme. And then within a week, the 14 biggest financial institutions will sell their stocks and steal your monies from all the unsuspecting investors. And they've been doing this since Conference of Parties 29. And the nuclear company ends up with the small modular reactor company ends up with a big boost into their. It's the only reason these companies even exist is because they're doing that, robbing everybody. And as far as I can tell, we don't have any proof they're trying to do. Well, we know for a fact they're not trying to build one. There's up to 100 companies out there with their own designs. So they haven't been able to settle on an actual design after 80 years on top of that. But we're talking about 80 to 100 recent new companies have showed up, and they're all scamming the investors. And it seems to appear to me that this is definitely well thought out Ponzi scheme. This is terrorism is what they're doing, right? And they do this every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and we cover it. One of the problems I got right now is I got so much documentation, and I can't keep, my brain can't keep up with it. Well, like the new stuff, if I don't use it constantly, then I lose track of what the keywords were that I put on it. Just give me a minute. Usually it's I can find it right away, but let's keep going, I guess. I don't know. It's pretty weird. And because I'm like a clearinghouse for information, sometimes it eludes me. Anyway, let's keep going, I guess. I'll be darn it, I can't find that. I find that hard to believe. That bugs me. Let me try one more thing. Not looking good. There we go. Yeah, you can't keep up with it. Let me see if I can give you the logistics of it anyway. My apologies, I didn't have it sitting there ready. International banks. This was the 23rd of September 2024. This was during the Conference of Parties. United Nations Scam Artist Machine. A group of 14 global financial institutions have expressed their support for the call to action to triple nuclear energy capacity by 2050. And so they're not per se investing in nuclear to make it happen. They're tricking the investors into buying stocks by artificially inflating the stocks in the companies that has small modular reactor attached to it. Like they haven't built one. The one doesn't exist anywhere on the planet in the context of what they're calling a small modular reactor. The Canadian small modular reactor is actually 24-story buildings. Half of it's underground, so still 120 feet above the ground. This is not something you're going to put on the back of a truck, okay? It's not something you're building in factories and shipping out to. It's not a portable reactor. It's a total Ponzi scheme. It's a 100% Ponzi scheme. And so what they're doing is they're buying shares for a couple of weeks, and you're talking about multi-million shares from 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet. And that's tricking people to invest in those companies which doesn't have a product. And then a couple of weeks later, they pull their shares out with the new investors' money attached to it. It makes a tidy profit, incredible profit. And they got each couple of weeks or month, they'll pick out 3 or 4 or 5 of these small modular reactor companies and artificially inflate their stocks. But NUSCALE and Nano seems to be always getting a chunk of that pie. And both of them are the least likely to produce a small modular reactor. You got no hopes. Even if they were trying to do it, there's no evidence. They haven't acquired land to build one. They haven't built a prototype. They're not trying to build a prototype. Small modular NUSCALE has an application, has a license, alleged license. It was rubber stamped, but they can't actually go ahead and build a product because they haven't got the full application for the design into the regulatory agencies. So you're talking about 1 million pieces of paper, roughly. So the non-nuclear industry, or the nuclear industry, the non-nuclear regulator, we call the Nuclear Regulation Commission, has to hire 300 or 400 people to go through, engineers to go through the 1 million pieces of paper, so-called, right? And that could take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they might have to submit it back because of design flaws and everything else. And then they would have to build a prototype on one of the national laboratories because it could melt down, blah, blah, blah. And all the national laboratories, of course, are built over the biggest aquifers in that part of the country that are feeding thousands and thousands of farms typically. And they're incredibly contaminated. The whole system is just sadistic. It's a sadistic system. It has no purpose outside of robbing and holding up renewable energy like geothermal. And anything a small modular reactor can do in the far, far future, small modular or geothermal can have up and running in 6 months or a year. And so what they're doing is they're scuttling the hopes and prospects of real solutions by using this routine. And these are loathsome people. They really are. They're like the worst humans conceivable. Last December, the United Nations Climate Change Conference of Parties, Constipated Parties 28, in Dubai saw 198 countries to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is caused by 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry. Because, think about a snowstorm that starts in Japan and in 20 days covers the entire planet, for instance. It never stops snowing, the snow never melts. But instead of snow, replace that with radiation, and the radiation never goes away. And the radiation pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. But on top of all of this, you got to put in many, many, many other facets of the legacy of the nuclear industry. And one of them is that there's 1,000 fuel pools full of reactor cores that are still splitting atoms. And they're all there's no containment. That's all released into the biosphere and the ecosystem. We're in real trouble if we don't come up with a solution. We are not going to have a future. We have to deal with this. Pretending this is not happening is idiotic. You got to accept that this is happening. You got to accept the documentation that I'm barely scratching the surface when I'm doing these presentations. I can't give you the entire nightmare each show because you won't come back anymore. Because we're trying to cover other news too. But we've got all these nuclear meltdowns over legacy emissions. And these are absurd amounts. Fukushima was an absurd amount. It could easily be 3,600 or more Chernobyls worth of emissions. 3,600. Each reactor at Fukushima, each building has 8 to 9 reactor cores in it. They're all gone in each of the 4 buildings. And each reactor core was equal to probably 100 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was a brand new reactor. Fukushima are massive plutonium-uranium, pure plutonium-uranium reactors, and they're massive reactors. And there was 4 of them confirmed. Now, they're denying it. They moved the goalpost in 2023, August the 24th. But that doesn't mean the documentation doesn't exist, that they're gone, right? And so it's a very convoluted story. No matter how you try to tell the story, there's so many important facets to the story. Like in the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. And you have to excuse me because I got 2 new mouses. I got two new mouse. And I got a new mouse pad. And I'll show you the old one. The old one's pretty rough. And the old one, you can see all the turned up edges on it. And so, it's not that I'm having problems, it's just that I'm having problems, I guess. Not terrible problems. These are good problems to have. It's just I got my coordination is a little lagging here tonight. So 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. And the problem is, like, I'm really upset that all the investors are being robbed. That is outrageous. That we don't have any big medias, any alternative medias coming out and articulating this is probably the most frightening facet of the story on top of that. 25 countries at the Conference of Parties 28 in Dubai pledged to work with tripling global nuclear power capacities to reach their net zero by 2050. Net zero is the other scam. That was a paper that was written by Miles Allen. Let me bring that up for you. Here we go. So Miles Allen done a paper. He's the physicist behind net zero. He's got a nice cushy job now in Cambridge University. He wrote this paper, so United Nations seized this paper and then is using that to bludgeon humanity. So you got the best way to, I got a neat little way of telling the story, I guess, but just give me one moment. Like, they lie so much. It's easier to show you the pieces where they told the truth, because the show's only going to last 30 seconds, because I'll be like, hi, have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next show. Because there's no truth. From the nuclear industry, we don't see anything. And we've never covered like a good story from the nuclear industry. Okay, so first off, think about this one here. The buildings actually blew up. It's ejected. The fuel pools in the reactor cores right out of the buildings. Reactor 4, which doesn't exist, the media is pretending it exists. And how do you have a conversation with people? Hey, did you know that reactor 4 is gone? And that CBS and BBC, CNN, ABC Australia are pretending that they're in the fuel pool. Like, the average person will just tell you to F off because you don't make any sense. You sound like you're rambling, right? But when you're watching this stuff and you see the pictures, this is some of the media. This is a fraction of the media. In 2013, 2014, when I made these pictures, pretending they're at the top of the building to your left. So if you ever heard of fake news, what's more fake than that picture, see? The media to your right, all of them pretending they're 150 feet above the nuclear meltdown stump to your left. This is the most insane story conceivable. I have no other example to show you of this magnitude. Well, I guess we do, but we're not allowed to talk about it on YouTube, which is the strangest statement imaginable too. And New York Climate Week, because they'll give you a strike on your account if you question stuff like 911, for instance. At New York Climate Week, a group of 14 financial institutions on Monday stated their recognition that the global civil nuclear energy projects have an important role to play in transition to low carbon. So you have net zero, which was a paper written by Miles Allen. You have carbon, and the carbon footprint was a paper produced by BP Oil. Let me bring that up. So BP Oil, how can we bring down your footprint? A brief and frustrating history of the carbon footprint was a campaign by BP Oil after they had one of their oil tankers wash up and kill millions of seabirds with oil. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil company BP in 2005. The campaign was intended to divert attention from the fossil fuel industry onto me and you. It instructed people to calculate their personal footprints and provide ways for people to go on a low-carbon diet. The strategy, also employed by other major fossil fuel companies, borrowed heavily from the previous campaigns by the tobacco industry, the plastic industry, to shift the blame from negative consequences of those industries, like underage smoking, cigarette butt pollutions, plastic pollution, onto the individuals who were consuming it, who were sold it through a massive campaign. So you had Miles Allen produced a paper called Net Zero. BP Oil had an advertising campaign to mitigate their obligations and then blame you for carbon, and then United Nations grabbed that one and ran with it. So now United Nations had net zero and carbon footprint to attack you with. Then there's the interview with the father of global warming, the hockey stick man, which is Wallace Brocker. So his paper on global warming. So you had global warming, you had net carbon footprint, you had net zero. That's the three papers. There was one more paper. So that was three papers snatched up by United Nations and then weaponized against humanity. So the fourth one was this sack of excrement, James Hansen, a revolting parasite who spent 15 minutes in 1988, and like thousands and thousands and thousands of people gave a congressional testimony on global warming. And so Hansen's testimony was pivotal and marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debate. So you had James Hansen wrote a paper that got snatched up by United Nations, and then 195 of the signatory countries seized upon it to weaponize it against humanity. So you had the global warming, the net zero, the BP Oil carbon footprint, and Brock Wallace, the interview with the father of global warming. Those four papers have been used now to destroy humanity, literally to take over humanity. Those 4 papers. And none of these, all of them have been debunked, of course. But there really is global warming. But what caused it? What is the actual reason that we have global warming? So this model to your left is plutonium-239 dispersal after 20 days at Fukushima. So think of a snowstorm and we'll get right back to the small this is part of the small modular reactor narrative, right? What I'm showing you, telling you. Because the idea of the small modular reactor is it'll mitigate climate change and global warming and net zero, and all of these are the narratives that we hear used constantly, right? In context of the small modular reactors. No, do. The problem with these stories are they're complicated, aren't they? Okay. So this model, this is follows. Think of this as a snowstorm from Fukushima. And the snowstorm is at this point right now, you're almost at day 20, 20 days after the snowstorm. And this is day 20 there. So this goes all the way up to day 30 before the model stops. But this doesn't stop just because this depiction stops. That routine you're looking at, and I have another way. So let me snip that in two. I'll put that on autoplay. So think of this as a snowstorm, right? After 20 days. This is what happened. 20 to 30 days. All the international models agree with this one, but this is actually radioactive fallout. But think of it as a snowstorm, that in 20 days your whole planet is covered in a snowstorm. Now think about the fact that this happened 80 years ago. And think about the fact that it never stops snowing. There's 1,000 fuel pools that are making the same type of plumes each day. And so a fuel pool would have 4, 5, 6 reactor cores or more into it. Those reactor cores are still splitting atoms. Each reactor core would have powered previously close to 1 million homes and businesses. So think about the fact that if there's 4, 5, or 6 reactor cores in a fuel pool, that's the same atoms to power 6 million homes and businesses are being released into the ecosystem from the fuel pools that have no containment. Once you take it out of the reactor core, after 14 months it has no containment anymore. It's still splitting the atoms. And this is why radioactive waste is so dangerous. But that's the one facet of the story they're never going to tell you, is the fuel is still splitting atoms. And it boils off about 120,000 liters in each of the 1,000 fuel pools every day. Now the small modular reactors, the fuel is going to be plutonium mixed oxide fuel. Now these emissions you're looking at here are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And this model in particular is based on 1 million to 10 million to 30 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And as you can see, symmetrically covering the whole planet. And if you model it out for 1,000 years, this is what the model looks like for the next 1,000 years. Because the model, once you got a model of any of the isotopes, you can extrapolate mathematically many of the other isotopes. And in the case of this, we're talking about curium, a nuclear meltdown, the curium, well, and just to use fuel rod, the biggest byproduct is the curium isotopes. And so the curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And plutonium killed all the animals in all the experiments. Let me explain that to you very quickly. All 13 of you. Amazing censorship on my video last night. That was a great show last night. We was cooking right along. That's what we was doing. And the censorship on me now has gone nuts. They got nobody else to censor. Like there's nobody else doing an educational program. And I'm the only person in history to do an educational program. And that drives me nuts. That is outrageous. And that's why you hear me say quite often, I disrespect academics. So the toxicity of plutonium, 144 beagle dogs and beagle puppies, now you know a beagle dog got a big nose on it, right? Typically described as a rabbit dog. So 144 dogs, every one of them died, like every other experiment with plutonium, that where they were allowed to live out their life and weren't so-called sacrificed, which is murdered. Tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and the liver occurred beginning about 3 years after the exposures. The lung, the skeleton, and the liver, but the bone tumors, the skeleton tumors, in 93 of the 144 dogs were the most common cause of death. And of course, if you know anything about this stuff, bone tumor is a brutal way to die. Lung tumors were in 46 dogs, were the second most common cause of death, and liver tumors were found in 20 dogs, but were the cause of death in only 2 dogs, and occurred later than the tumors in the bones and the lungs. And that the tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal and were competing causes of death, and that the finding in dogs suggests, now this study was produced by Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, and they're actually the U.S. Navy. So you got to be very careful how sneaky these friggers, these scumbags, these subhuman species actually are. These findings in dogs suggest that similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to uranium-238, plutonium-238. Now the study, Dr. Raymond Gilmed, he was the lead author. He has a lot of studies. Another one of these studies was on curium isotopes. A model of inhaled curium compounds in dogs, application to human exposure data. The curium isotopes are the major byproducts in the irradiated nuclear fuel. So forget the fact that it's the alpha, the significant fraction of the alpha emitting radionuclide inventories. Forget that. That's not important. What is important is it's the major byproduct. It's the major isotope of fuel once it's gone through the cycle. Curium isotopes. Hence the reason we call a nuclear meltdown core a curium core. What's interesting about this is that the curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium. And the plutonium killed all the dogs. But there's another caveat to this one. These findings in dogs suggest a similar dose-related biological effects that's similar, which is simply not true. The truth is that the humans are 50 times less efficient than animals, their kidneys are, at filtering this stuff out. So it was discovered that human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than animal kidneys at removing the lethal plutonium. And so it means that humans are 50 times more susceptible than the animals, and the animals all died of brutal tumors, and that this is a plutonium-239 dispersal. The top left one is based on 20 days, and above me is 21 days. Now, the numbers they're using is a fraction of the actual inventories that were lost. And that's really important facet of the story. So let me just walk you through that. They really are just scumbags. They're just nothing but degenerates in this industry. So the buildings actually detonated and ejected the reactor cores and the fuel pools. The fuel pools at each of these Fukushima reactors would have had at least 4 decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings. And because you take a large fraction every 14 months out of the reactor, you're assuming there's around 8 reactor cores stored at the top of these buildings or more. Now, when you look at reactor 3 and 4, there's nothing there. It's just stumps. These were 19-story, 190 feet, 65-meter buildings. At the top of the buildings, you see the red depiction up there and the red depiction over there, and this is the reactor core. It's at the top of the buildings. And the fuel comes out of the reactors underwater now the whole time, and in the reactors in water. And out of the reactor, it has to, if it touches oxygen, it'll catch fire. It literally detonates, and that's why the buildings look like that over there. So the buildings you're seeing, the explosions of the building was the confirmation that the reactors were melted down. Right? And the explosion was caused by the zirconium cladding being exposed to oxygen and catching fire. It right away burns at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. It's releasing an enormous amount now of very volatile gases. And hydrogen is just one of the many. Now, once you displace the oxygen, if you reintroduce oxygen or a spark, hydrogen will detonate. And this building, in particular, the plutonium mixed oxide reactor number 3, was using reclaimed uranium, reclaimed plutonium, which is the same stuff they're going to use, allegedly, for their small modular reactors if they actually ever build one. The idea of them having one up and actually producing electricity for consumption is 30, 40, 50 years down the road at best. You'd have to build one on a national laboratory site. They have to get an application, a complete application, not a half an application like NUSCALE has in. And NUSCALE, of course, is tied up in mass lawsuits because it ripped off all of its previous investors. But because it's sanctioned and funded by the government for so many years, so I got a bit of a frog in my throat, mind you, but okay. So that explosion, reactor 1 to your left, right alongside it was reactor 2, then it's reactor 3, and right alongside of reactor 3 was reactor 4. Now we don't have the video for some reason. And the reason was they didn't want to admit reactor 4 also blew up. 4 little duckies, 4 little nuclear meltdowns, not a little by no means, because unlike Chernobyl, these had reactor cores for decades stored at the top of the buildings. They're gone. So you're talking about 36 reactor cores are gone. Now you can pretend it's not, but that's all you're doing. And I provided you with more than enough documentations for my assertions. And you can go to my playlist where I'll provide you with it is incomprehensible amount of documentation laid out for you, and everything from the water, the ELP systems, the Riva systems, to the 30 million one-ton bags, to intimate details about the reactors. You're not going to find anywhere else. You know, and another thing you're not going to find anybody explain to you is what is net zero, what is global warming, where did it come from, what is carbon footprint, where did that come from, and what is the global warming. Or you got James Hansen with the global warming policy debate from a single congressional testimony that was seized upon and weaponized against you by UN. By the worst humans imaginable. UN is truly the worst creatures we've ever seen. All right, let's keep her going here. And the censorship on me is really special, isn't it? Well, there's maybe 5 people out there pushing back. And every one of us are censored, incredibly censored. I'm pretty prolific in the documentation and challenging the narratives. And I built this platform a very long time ago specifically to sustain a continued attack upon the nuclear industry. I am gone to war against this industry a long time ago, and I'm still going strong. It's not easy to do the things I'm doing on top of that. It's very time-consuming and resource-intensive. But that's how we built the whole operation. And having 2 new mices, woohoo, makes life a lot sweeter. And a new mouse pad. I'm loving it. I'm starting to get used to it here tonight. I'm loving it because that's what it's all about. The idea is to keep the pressure on the nuclear industry. So any of the investors and policymakers, they will find me. They can hide me. The nuclear industry can hide me all they want, but everybody knows who I am in the industry. I'm not like blowing my own horn or nothing. It's just I've been around for so long, it's impossible for the key players not to know who I am. It's impossible. And because I'm not full of crap and garbage and nonsense and propaganda. I'm only giving you documentation and facts and providing it for you, which is the most difficult form of journalism, is to provide you with the documentation. I should be just doing a radio show. But I can't teach properly with just a radio show. So I built this incredible operation, and we do field studies and research. Now, I've been sick, pretty brutally sick for the last couple of years, but I haven't given up. I've done everything I can to try to restore my health. I had 7 stints put in. I was in intensive care for 21 days at that point. And it wasn't looking good, I can tell you that much. If they didn't do me that day, and they flew in, there was an actual special team flew in. Nobody knows who the hell it was. The local hospital was about to do the surgery on me, and he came in and he said he couldn't do the surgery because I was CIA or FBI. I said, absolutely not. And he said, well, there's a special team just flew in. They're just scrubbing up, and they'll be here to get you up to speed. And don't worry, you're in good hands. My colleagues, they said, they'd never met before, are the best of the best. They flew in just to do you. And I was awake the whole time. And let's be very clear about this. There was no talking. Or give me this or give me that, but there was no chatter. It was all business. And when he finished, I had 7 stints, which is a record for the province. So somebody out there was determined to get me back in the fight, that's for sure. Somebody was like, if we keep him around, he's going to make a lot of misery for this industry. And I appreciate it, don't get me wrong. I have no idea who done it for me, and I most likely never will, but I don't have pains in my chest anymore, do I? Amongst the health problems I've already had, because I used to be a commercial diver and I had got the bends, which took me out of business for over a decade, and I had to learn to walk again. So even today I'm not very healthy, but I'm definitely healthy enough to keep this routine up for a long time. Nordic partnership for SEALER small modular reactor deployment. The Nordic partnership, a rendering of the plant, and this is all we ever see is these renderings. And you got people out there loitering around, and you got a stupid looking building. It's always trying to look like some neat architectural. They don't have one. They can't quantify this assertion. The Canadian small modular reactor is going to be a 24-story building. Half of it's going to be underground. It's still going to be 12 stories high. So when they show you these little tiny structures, I can guarantee you it's not going to be anything like that whatsoever. It's going to be big and stupid like every other nuclear disease factory on the planet. Licensing work is currently underway. Well, actually it's not, is it? They don't have an application into the regulatory agency. Right? We know that because we cover this all the time. So when they tell you licensing work, that's just to try to get people to invest in a company that doesn't have a product. It's despicable because it works on top of that. Mission 2030, Holtec. These were all headlines from yesterday and today, by the way. Holtec targets first small modular reactor 300 deployment at the Michigan Palisades plant, which is closed down. They're going to reopen it, and they're going to build the small modular reactor, they say, Holtec's version of a small modular reactor. Holtec has invested over 50 million USD to date in the development of environmental activities. In other words, they don't have a license and they don't have an application into the regulatory agency. In other words, they don't have a design. And 50 million, rather, is the hopes that they'll get on the stock market and then they'll make billions of dollars. And this whole operation is run by Chris Singh. He's the owner, he's the president, the vice president, the janitor, and everything else. And he's an enemy of humanity. If you look at his legacy, he's clearly an enemy of humanity and the 8 million species. Again, why is it in the last 2 days we got all these small modular reactor companies showing up with false claims that somehow or another they're the one you should invest in? Kärnfull advances small modular reactor plans in Sweden. And here's their rendition. Of course, it's not going to look like this. The idea is to lull you into complacency, right? We look forward to deepening our analysis and exploring how small modular reactors can contribute to a sustainable and stable energy supply. Well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you use geothermal? The technology now exists to drill as deep as you want, right? Quatsi Electric and a number of other companies have cracked that code for the final 2 kilometers. So conventional oil drilling rigs can drill pretty deep. But what they need to drill is the extra couple of kilometers. And the problem with the extra couple of kilometers is it's a lot hotter. And it's very difficult on the bits. And when you're down, say, 10 kilometers, it's a long way to extract your bits to put a new bit on and send it back down. And because the rocks are super hot and cooled, they're very tough rocks to drill through. But the new technology they developed and have ready to use, but can't get the investments, is stuff like Quatsi Electric, of course, which is getting there. They're going to evaporate the rocks the final couple of kilometers to get down to 700, 800, 900 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which means you're hotter than gas, oil, coal, or nuclear, which makes them obsolete. And so the geothermal is everywhere under everybody's feet. And that's one of the very last things you'll ever hear mentioned is geothermal. You'll hear solar and batteries. Why would you do batteries of all things when there's so many other ways to store energy? What's the point of that? So the other company that's I consider one of the leaders, what they're going to do is use pneumatic water jets at 25,000 pounds per square inch down at the deeper part of the drill to, all the way down because it's much quicker. So 25,000 pounds per square inch water jets will slice up any rocks in their way. And I mean, it'll slice it up and effortlessly too. And it can do that, theoretically for dozens of miles. It doesn't have to, of course. But on the back of that, at the same time, is going to be pneumatic hammers. Right, same as water, driven by water pressure. And that's going to crush the stuff that the 25,000 pounds per square inch water jets are slicing up. And that'll get you down to the 700, 800, 900 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, just like butter. It'll be nothing to it. And so, in other words, anything, and I mean anything that small modular reactors might be able to do, geothermal can do it within 1 year. Even with crappy technology, you can still beat whatever technology you're looking at when it comes to nuclear. Nuclear is pointless. Not only that, it now has threatened the existence of humanity and the 8 million species. It's compromised, rather, the existence of humanity and the 8 million species due to an extinction level event that is playing out post Fukushima. Because Fukushima was a pulse event with 36 reactors. How's the censorship going tonight? Oh, 15 viewers, 15 likes. 14 votes are stocks for non-existing small modular reactors, a Ponzi scheme to loot the unsuspecting investors. And I kind of outlined that at the very beginning with the 14 financial institutions. And I've done actual entire presentation on the 14 financial institutions. So if you look it up on my site, you should be able to find that presentation also. I don't care how much they censor me. It's irrelevant. You should care at all. It's your future, your children's future, and the future of all the species. It's worth caring about, I would hope. In March 2022, Kärnfull next signed a memorandum of understanding. Now we hear these constantly. With the United States-based General Electric regarding the boiling water reactor X300. That's a 24-story building. That's a 240-foot building. How can you quantify, which is bigger than the gigawatt building at Fukushima, for instance, or 1/3 of the size, rather, of the gigawatt reactors at Fukushima? Well, none of them are they're like 0.89 gigawatts or something. So this is only 1/3 the size, but it's actually 50 feet higher, or 40 feet higher. 50 feet higher than Fukushima's reactors, and it's only 1/3 the output. And it's using mixed oxide fuel. Now the thing with the small modular reactors and studies done on that was that it's going to produce 30 times more high level, or 30 times more what they call intermediate level waste. This is still lethal by the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the X-rays. It's going to produce 35 times more high level waste, and it's going to produce 5 times more fuel when you scale it up. So if you build 3 of these so-called small modular reactors to get a gigawatt, you're going to end up with not only more expensive, but 5 times more fuel rods, 35 times more high-level waste, and 30 times more intermediate level waste. So 65 times more brutal waste and 5 times more fuel rods that are splitting atoms. You got any idea how stupid it is to even consider this industry? It cannot, and the only way they can produce any power in the version they're talking about, the so-called small modular reactors, is if they use plutonium mixed oxide fuel. Plutonium mixed oxide fuel, now remember what I mentioned earlier before. The emissions from a normal nuclear disease factory / nuclear plant are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So when you take the fuel that's already gone through the cycle, the fuel cycle, and reclaim the uranium, reclaim the plutonium, and then turn that into fuel and put it back in the reactor, that's known as plutonium mixed oxide. Japan and France are currently studying taking that fuel and recycling that, and then having, I don't even know how you could describe that stuff besides stupid. Plutonium mixed oxide fuel shouldn't exist because it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. In other words, a single atom, and you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see it. So a single atom is guaranteed to make you sick for the rest of your life. Your body will attack it for the rest of your life. It's in your body, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, wrecking chromosomes, DNA, cells, and permanent lesions to your organ. Your body has to try to repair that every second. It can't do it. And at the same time, and it does that by producing a massive amount of white blood cells every second, forever, and then massive amount of white blood cells every second to attack the source. And that's forever. So if you cut your finger Your closest joints and maybe your spleen are producing white blood cells to fix the cut on your finger. It could take a couple of days, it could take a week, depending how big it is. And then your white blood cell counts go back down. Your red blood cell, which carries oxygen, nutrition, comes back up. But when you got radiation in your body, your white blood cell count goes up. Your red blood cell count, which carries oxygen, nutrition, goes down permanently. And that's applicable. That's just one of the many brutal factors and facets to this sadistic and nihilistic entity. Because there is nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against anthropogenic man-made radiation. Fallout, for instance. There's nothing on the planet got an immune system that can mitigate this or deal with it or contain it. And our bodies contain it by building a tumor around it. So that's not a containment. That's now it goes malignant and ends up everywhere else too, right? So this is an industry that should never. It can only exist through brutal censorship and contempt for everybody and everything. The people in it and the people that are censoring me and you are fixated on being monsters. They can get a job anywhere else. They got incredible education typically, but they choose this job, which they have to lie to maintain to their friends and families and loved ones every single day. They got to keep their lies straight. It doesn't make any sense, eh? Why buy it? I done a video on this female idiot who was at Cambridge, MIT Cambridge. And she was making TikTok videos, getting a multi-million views on a video. And she was out there regurgitating the famous propaganda the industry's been using for 80 years. And so here you had somebody who's not even graduated from university, but it was necessary to get out and start promoting propaganda before she even got a degree. It's absurd. And that person somehow is able to disconnect herself from the reality and rationalize that that is the only option she has. Her name was Kaylee Cunningham. And she's despicable. I've done a whole show on her. She's a despicable, hideous monster to do it. But we see so many of these despicable, hideous monsters. These worthless scum. These are worthless people. The pro-nuclear clearly are worthless humans. They look like humans, but they don't have any of the attributes. And they have to tell lies constantly. They're very conscious of keeping the lies straight. They're very conscious of telling the lies. It's almost like it's a duty. It's, you know how a lot of gangsters, to be a part of a gang, you got to go kill somebody. Well, the nuclear industry is, you got to kill a lot of people to be part of that gang. And they should be taken down with the RICO laws, or at least the racketeering statutes. What they're doing is absolutely, unequivocally unconscionable. It's unconscionable to poison everybody and everything on the planet so they can pretend to their friends and families that they're important. Because that's all they're doing. They're pretending to their friends and families that they're part of the nuclear industry and therefore by proxy they're important. But the reality of it is they're part of a monster industry that hurts everything permanently, that destroys everything good, and that takes puppies and beagle dogs and slaughters them with the most gruesome ways to die. How can anybody covet anything to do with that? So these people clearly have a mental illness. The design licensing is based on larger boiling water reactors. With the sort of General Electric, United States-based General Electric Hitachi boiling water reactor design 300 megawatt is 240 feet. It's half of it's going to be underground, the other half is above ground. How can anybody suggest that this is a small modular reactor when it's 50 feet bigger with 1/3 the power, 50 feet bigger than the full buildings would have been at Fukushima. Think about how sadistic the media and the nuclear industry, they're so powerful. They have all the media pretending they're at the top of a building that don't exist. Because if you find that out and you realize they're poisoning every human and every species on the planet, every plant, every insect, everything is now on a permanent siege, and the majority of it has already been permanently destroyed. Because it can't reproduce because of the full body x-rays in all the forests and meadows worldwide. Small modular reactor, building confidence in a new nuclear technology delivered in a new way. It's much more lethal. You're using plutonium mixed oxide fuel. You're producing 30 times more intermediate, 35 times more high level, and 5 times more fuel rods. It's idiotic. So a small modular reactor produces more waste than a single small modular reactor will produce way more toxic waste than a large reactor does. It's like the whole question is absurd. And when you scale it up to megawatts, it's absurd again. Why are you letting this industry vomit all over you? A decade ago, George Osborne set out in the spending review plans for the idiot machine in the United Kingdom, and the pro-nuclear community in the United Kingdom, like everywhere else, is nothing but a degenerate, sadistic bunch of cowards and monsters. But they're slightly worse than all the other monsters. I think they take pride in being actual demons. To be a global leader in a new kind of nuclear technology, the small modular reactor. Well, you've been at it for 80 years. How come you don't have a product? Is it because you're not trying? Is it because you're just looting the investors? The chairman of Rolls-Royce small modular reactors, which are over 300 megawatts, they're the furthest thing from the small modular reactors. They're the exact same design as any other reactor in Great Britain, except it's going to be the same size, it's just less power, and they're going to call it a small modular reactor. The idea is to keep the nuclear industry moving forward, see? And they don't care if they kill everything. They don't care. Because the average person has no concept. And most importantly, their friends and families and loved ones don't know they're monsters. They think that their loved ones are good, are good people, when these are the worst humans conceivable. The pro-nuclear are literally nothing but goblins. Even if you meet them, if you see them in interviews, you say, well, that's a goblin. They can't hide the fact that they're disgusting. They can wear all the jewelry, all the makeup, all the bling-bling, drive fancy cars, live in great big houses, estates, whatever. But they can't get past the fact that everybody who knows them knows they're a scumbag. They're just really nasty people. And they gravitated towards this industry because that's the only industry where they fit in, where everybody is a goblin. Small modular reactors with potential for modular design, scalability, increased speed of build. Well, like, what are you talking about? You haven't built one. You can't quantify that assertion. And that the Canadian small modular reactor is a 240-foot building. How is that going to be a modular design? How is that scalability? How is that an increased speed of build? How is it? And it's going to produce more waste than a conventional reactor. Like the single small reactor will produce more waste than a large reactor. And if you build up to megawatts, you're talking about 30 times more intermediate, which is lethal waste, by the way, 35 times more high level, and 5 times more fuel rod, so when you scale it up. So even just their version of a small modular reactor, which has nothing to do with the word small, is still the biggest producer of disease on the planet. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor core, no containment, it's still splitting atoms for 1 million homes, but now they're released directly into the environment where they never go away. And so the bioaccumulation now has tipped the scale. We are in an extinction event because of this. We've sterilized most of the species and humans on the planet from radiation fallout and radiation, gamma shines, neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the X-rays, the alphas. And you know, like when you release gammas and X-rays and neutrons and betas, they're pulsing energy at the speed of light, and they don't mingle. Those pulses of energy don't cross each other. When those pulses of energy almost at the speed of light from gammas and neutrons and betas and they hit each other, they change direction almost at the speed of light. So you have a gammas and an alpha, or a beta or a neutron hitting each other. Their pulse of energy every second almost at the speed of light hits each other. It's coming in almost at the speed of light. It's coming almost at the speed of light. And then it changes direction. That's known as an X-ray. And because of that particular effect, all the species in your meadows and your forests and your gardens and everywhere else is getting full body X-rays. And you and your children. I wouldn't even, if I had kids here, like young kids, grandchildren or something, I wouldn't let them play outdoors. However, the primary hurdle to wider small modular reactor adoption remains the perceived, isn't that perceived, financial risk? You don't have 14 of the biggest financial institutions on the planet since Conference of Parties 29 buying shares in small modular reactor companies for something to do. They're doing it to loot the unsuspecting investors who comes in behind them, to get, to make a fortune every couple of weeks by selling their shares, and then to have a kickback to the small modular reactor companies so they stay afloat, to keep the misery machine going for longer. It's an insidious plan. It's a cowardly, nightmarish, despicable plan is what they're carrying out. Only the worst of the worst things can happen to us by them continuing to keep this Ponzi scheme going. This is a Ponzi scheme. Our stocks for non-existent small modular reactor companies, they don't have a product, right? A Ponzi scheme. Clearly that's a Ponzi scheme. And then the result is dilute the unsuspecting investors. And clearly that's what we're seeing over and over and over since Conference of Parties 29. When 14 biggest financial institutes, that I showed you that headline earlier, and you can go out and I done a whole show just on that, so you can look that up, and that'll really get you, hopefully, to the point where you'll never invest in this disgusting, parasitic, hateful, scumbag, mass murdering industry. Wendzel Andrews pushing incentives for small modular nuclear reactors in Michigan. This is another idiot machine. Andrews says the new technology of small modular reactors should be encouraged, as these small modular reactors are less costly to manufacture, don't require as much cooling, are nearly risk-free. Now, how do you quantify an assertion like that when you don't have a small modular reactor to quantify it with? Like, that's what we got. That's what we're up against, is this perpetual bombardment of these degenerates suggesting that they exist when they simply don't exist. Like the first story we done tonight from Fox Business News, suggesting that portable small modular reactors are available for homes when they simply are. They're so far from existing, it's not funny. And so that anybody who invests money in the small modular reactors and lose it should join a class action lawsuit, should include Fox Business News for manipulating him into buying the stocks, because that's what that was all about with nano nuclear. And I mean, they really are the scumbags of the earth. They really, truly are some of the worst humans you're ever going to come across. NUSCALE is also at the top of that one, right? Buy or sell or hold. No, don't buy, and you don't have to sell, and don't hold. They got class action lawsuits against from all the other investors they robbed of billions of dollars. Wall Street's most wanted, too highly shorted stocks right now. NUSCALE powers. NUSCALE doesn't have a reactor. They got an application into the regulatory agency for the license, but that's not complete. They got a rubber stamp saying that they have the license to manipulate the investors, but they don't actually have the entire application into the regulatory agency. The design of the reactor. They don't have it into the agency. So, it's the equivalent of me telling you, I have a wormhole, and you can go back in time, and or you can go ahead in time, see what the next lottery numbers are, and then in the future you can play those numbers and win the lottery. Well, you can't. And then I would be arrested for that, right? That's a Ponzi scheme. What they're doing is such an incredible Ponzi scheme. It's just unconscionable. It's unconscionable that they still exist. It's unconscionable. It's absolutely unconscionable that they're not being held accountable. And like, I do these videos in desperation to educate the unsuspecting victims and the future victims to steer clear of anything nuclear at all costs. You have no way. You have no way. You might get lucky a couple of times and make a small return, but they're going to get you because they're using unethical and criminal techniques to keep this industry in the newspaper. Right, you got the 14 biggest financial institutes are buying shares for a couple of weeks, like millions at a time, and that artificially inflates the worth of a worthless stock. But once you put enough people put their money in from outside of that entities, mom and pop so-called investors, the big financial institutions are going to sell their stocks and steal their monies. And they're doing it every month minimum. And this is what we're seeing again now. The big pump and dump is here again. These are, the only way you can describe this is criminal. This is 100% criminal. These are monsters. And despite generating just $7 million in revenue over the last month, well, they sell more than that in stocks every month. Then they're dumped 2 weeks later. And that's the 14 biggest financial institutes are stealing the money from the other investors that come along. And then whatever's left over, the small modular reactor company is taking it and spending it. The whole story is just disgusting. It's a disgusting story. And there's 80 to 100 of these new small modular reactor companies that are doing the exact same friggin' thing worldwide. None of them have any intentions of actually building a small modular reactor on top of that. They have to have the illusion that they might be able to build it or they're planning on building it. But I can guarantee you right now, they're not trying to build it. And I know these are typically very boring shows. That's nuclear, isn't it? They're important shows, unfortunately. NUSCALE Notable had to cancel its project to build a first small modular reactor in the United States due to costs running way over expectations. It was going to cost them 20 times more to build their small modular reactors when you scaled it up to a gigawatt than it would cost to build a typical gigawatt of nuclear power. 20 times more. And they didn't buy any land. They didn't buy the equipment. They weren't acquiring the academics. They didn't have a full license into the regulatory agencies. These are scumbags of the worst type. It's a Ponzi scheme, and they're getting away with it now. Many years, we've been covering this for many years. 5 years in particular has been a big push. Maybe this is 6th year now, right? So they say still NUSCALE is the first and only company to receive a small modular reactor design certification. But they don't have the whole application in. That was rubber stamped. They still haven't brought in the full application. And so they can't go ahead and build a design at one of the regulatory or one of the international laboratories. because that's what you would do to build your first reactor, or second, or third even, to see if it doesn't melt down or you get the kinks out of it. And that all of their designs are based on fuel that they're not allowed to have in the United States, on top of that, or Canada, which is the plutonium mixed oxide fuel. The reason we don't produce that fuel is because it's so polluting. It'll contaminate everything within 100,000 square miles. The whole industry legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty, outright fraud, Ponzi schemes, and perpetual genocides. I just don't understand. I guess I do, but I don't understand why they're so evil. Is it just that's who they are? That's their personalities? They can't help it? Let's keep going here. Like a small modular reactor. The fuel, the plutonium mixed oxide fuel, was reactor 3. That's why that cooked off. That's why that. So look at the explosion in reactor 1. That was a normal reactor. But look at the explosion in reactor 3. That's a plutonium mixed oxide fuel. So they typically cook off 200,000 times hotter than a typical normal reactor, because these are the plutonium enriched uranium reactors. So another one to keep, like their example, what they're going to use for an example, can small nuclear reactors solve India's big energy challenge? India, of course, is notorious for being a degenerate. There's 1 million children a year die there of dysentery, diarrhea, and pneumonia, which is curable for about 15 cents a kid, which is your typical salts. Small modular reactor offer potential benefits: compact design, faster deployment, reduced emissions. So what are you talking about? You can't quantify that assertion. You don't have one. And as anybody knows, when you're talking about building something big and sophisticated, it's never going to be compact, it's never going to be faster, it's not going to be reduced emissions. All of these are simply lies meant to lull people into complacency. And by a doctor, therefore it must be true, is it? Do you want to see the list of criminal doctors that I actually have? It'll make you sick to your guts, actually, what they have done to children and other people. The advanced safety features of small modular reactors. There is no advanced safety features. You don't even have the reactors. And your alleged safety features simply are not true, are they? It means that an exclusion zone of 1.5 kilometers around them is currently mandated by regulators in India, may not be necessary. Again, the exclusion zone around nuclear power plants is 10 miles. These should be at least 100. Relaxing this rule could allow the dismantling of old coal-fired plants, construction of small modular reactors. Well, you see, geothermal, quasi-electric, that's what they've been saying for years, is they can build a geothermal plant at the coal, gas, or oil, or nuclear plants, and when it's finished, switch off the disease factories and light up the geothermal. And so small modular reactor companies have seized up on that narrative and has attempted to take over that narrative, thereby significantly reducing the time and complexity of acquiring new land sites. Well, no, the criteria for a nuclear plant for land is completely different than the criteria of a coal plant. So you're still going to have to re-engineer the whole site in order to accommodate the nuclear, or you're going to have a nuclear meltdown, and that will destroy the industry. They're going to be forced to re-engineer that site to accommodate the nuclear idiot machines. Furthermore, designers claim that small modular reactors can be partially assembled in factories before shipping to their final installation location. Well, just because they claim that doesn't mean it's true. The Canadian small modular reactor is a 24-story building, 240-foot building. You're not going to build that in a factory and ship the parts out. And their version is over 80 small modular reactor designs have been conceived and studied globally. Again, there's no consensus on how to do it. So they're all fumbling in the dark is what you're seeing. These are not designs, by the way, that's companies. There's a big difference between a company and a design. None of them have an application into the regulatory agency. Therefore, none of them have a design. Only 2 have been successfully built, really, and connected to the power grid. Really? Well, that's really interesting. Who might that be? Oh, you're going to suggest that the academic barge from Russia, which is an old barge, it was an old derelict abandoned barge that they patched up and painted, and most of the reactor parts were from used reactors that they used to build it. It was supposed to be like a test, like you would do at the national laboratories where you build a test reactor. Because Russia don't give a shit, they went ahead and used it. These buildings are actually 14 stories above the ocean, and they're probably 5 or 6 stories below the ocean. You're talking about a 15 to 20 story buildings that happens to float. How can you quantify by calling that a small modular reactor? You worthless, disgusting parasites. Every time I see them suggesting this is a small modular reactor, first off, it's pathetic. It's pathetic to suggest that these are small modular reactors. You see the ship behind it? It dwarfs it. These are massive, massive underwater and massive above water. These are not small modular reactors. These are the farthest thing from a small modular reactor. Now, on top of that, recently, they changed their fuel. And they said they're keeping the fuel in a storage room. You don't keep fuel from a reactor, particularly the plutonium mixed oxide fuel, in a room. You keep it in a fuel pool. And so what it means is you can't contain the emissions. The fuel is still splitting the atoms. And so that particular reactor now that's up in Russia in this little community, every time the wind blows towards the community from the ocean side, they're being pounded with radioactive fallout 24 hours a day. Because the fuel in the pool is still splitting the same amount of atoms as it was in the reactor. And you can't contain it, so everything is vented. These are parasites. This is an industry unequivocally of nothing but parasites. The entire industry. We have never seen a useful person in this industry. We see parasite, lawyers and parasites over, and scams and Ponzi schemes over and over in every fucking story. Lawmaker introduces a task force to explore nuclear energy potential. The task force will evaluate the potential benefits and challenges. Well, come to my site for the challenges. Will you give me that? Because if you take what I tell you into consideration, you're going to walk away from the idiot, moron, dummy small modular reactor and put your money and effort and time and energy, which will be quite fruitful, into geothermal. Of utilizing small modular reactors as a way to address the state's energy needs. Why would you throw your eggs in a basket of a product that doesn't even exist? How come you would go that route? So if you're trying to come up with a solution, clearly small modular reactors are not a solution. And that's what we see. We see them scuttling the future of all these communities in this planet. That's all we see from this industry. It's nothing but scumbags. Nuclear energy, specifically small modular reactors, presents an opportunity to provide Delaware with a stable, a reliable, like what are you talking about? And then have the arrogance to call it carbon free when it's the most resource intensive industry on the planet. Like, why are you people so evil? Why is it like this always? I know Gene Hackman died, and his wife and their dog, apparently. I know the Epstein files are supposed to be released today, according to the U.S. Attorney General. And this industry is out to kill everything. That's everything they're doing ultimately ends up in exterminating all the species. So the academic is the furthest thing from a small modular reactor. But yet here's India media coming out suggesting that it's a small modular reactor. Is nuclear-powered maritime's best hope to hit net zero, which is a paper by Miles Allen, as I showed you earlier. They really are a plague, aren't they? Like, how else could you describe this industry besides a parasite that is going to suck the life out of your planet? How small modular reactors are revolutionizing nuclear power. Like, what are you talking about? They don't exist. You're decades and decades away from that coming to fruition. And you can throw, and we give them all the money you could ever hope for. We give them all the resources they could ever hope for. We give them all the media they could ever dream of. We give them access to all the universities, all the schools. They still can't get it together. Not only can they not get it together, they're not even trying. Because it's easy to be a scumbag. And that's really all they're really good at. Right? Their whole legacy is predicated upon being a degenerate scumbag. And so therefore they'll never amount to anything but a degenerate scumbag. Because that's all they know how to do. It's natural for them to be a scumbag. It's the only thing they're good at. Portable nuclear reactors are now available for your home. Nano nuclear energy. Who's on the stock markets trying to raise shares for a product that doesn't exist? And now they're so desperate, they're saying that portable nuclear reactors are now available for your home. Like, there's such a disconnect in that statement that it's unbelievable that they don't get challenged. Let's do a little intermission here. I'm going to do a little intermission. James Luce had posted a video. I want to go listen to it. We'll come back to the show here in a minute. I love stuff like this, eh? I'm a junkie when it comes to this type of material. I'm literally a music junkie, anti-nuclear music junkie at this stage. James has produced so much material. It's absurd, eh? The dead zones. I can't wait like a normal person till the end of the show to watch it. We're going to watch it now. I'm going to adjust everything if necessary, so just bear with me. I want to make sure I get the highest quality we can, 1080. Let's give it a go. I'm going to adjust the volume in real time on my side. So let me set that up. Because I can control the volume from inside, I finally realized. So don't worry about it, I'm going to catch it.
The Pacific's too quiet. No whale calls for days. Feels like something's missing.
Sir, it's like the sea's gone silent. No movement. Nothing. And that water DeSalle unit. Something's wrong. We're pulling up odd readings. Metals.
Could be fallout. Radiation. Fukushima. Radiation.
From the meltdowns, check the DeSalle again. I don't want another USS Reagan incident.
The Reagan? Didn't those sailors?
They called it Operation Tomodachi. First on the scene after the meltdown, sailors said the fallout covered everything. I heard their health tanked after cancers, thyroid problems. The radiation spread farther than they ever told us. Get a full water report now. We can't drink contaminated water again. What if we're sailing through a dead zone? Fukushima cores are still melting. Those isotopes don't just disappear. No whales, no life. The USS Reagan crew was breathing this stuff in. Did anyone ever get the truth? Enough. We're not sitting ducks in contaminated water. We need to know how far this reaches. How many more are gonna pay for their cover-ups? It's too late, sir. We're in it, the water's fouled, and the ocean's on silent. Just like the Reagan, but we're trapped in it. Then we're next on the list. If the sea's already poisoned, who's gonna save us? Is there anything left? What's out there?
Awesome, man. Holy smokes, eh? Holy shit. James is really... He's making all of these videos with AI, right, on top of that. And now he's starting to be... I don't know if he's getting bored with producing so much material. Now he's really going deep into the... Well, I guess what it is, he's just getting better at coordinating everything to tell a story, because the best music out there is a story. But that's a few of the videos he's produced recently. We played 2 of them last night. Let me show you what I'm talking about. That one's called Dead Zone. And so Medusa's music box is just an amazing video. It's different than his typical music, right? But it's done with the same care and thought. And then this one here is incredible. Fukushima Meltdown Museum Guided Tour. We played that at the end of the show last night, and the Medusa music box at the beginning. I'm going to play in a little while Small Modular Reactor Hype Train. And we're basically finished, so we're going to play that in a few minutes. That's a just unbelievable song. Wait till you hear that song. I started off the song, but you got to watch the video too to really appreciate it. We'll come in and close the poll after. 16 viewers on the most important story in human history. Is just, you know, you're doing something right when you censor it that much. My Geiger counter up there, by the way, is real time. This is absurd numbers. Let me see here. Yeah, we are finished the show, so we might as well close it out with I'm going to close it out with Small Modular Reactor Hype Train. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the volume for you on my side. And then I'm going to come and close the poll. Here we go.
It's safe again, no meltdowns, no waste, no fear. If it's on a truck parked by your school, risk, nah, that's the golden rule. A lawsuit here, a bailout there, but hey, don't breathe the Utah air. Hype train, full speed ahead. Choo choo, baby, that's what they said. More reactors, more mistakes. When it derails, guess who pays? A factory built so nice and neat, stack 'em up on any street. A soda can could last for years, but where it vents, that's unclear. They called it clean, they called it cheap, till the budget's in too deep. Cost per watt through the roof, we swear it works, but where's the proof? Hype train, watch it roll. On your street, out of control. They want it fast, they want it now. Same old scam in a different town.
Accidents don't happen with great frequency. SMRs produce less waste. Spent fuel, just store it on site. Trust us, this time we got it right.
Hype train, can't slow down. Crashing straight into your town. No meltdown, no waste, no doubt. Wait, where's the money now?
Well, that didn't work.
Hype train, can't slow down. Crashing straight into your town. No meltdown, no waste, no doubt. Wait, where's the money now?
That didn't work.
Just wow, eh? You gotta love it, man. Get over there and give them a thumbs up. I'm gonna close the poll down. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on Sunday, hopefully. I know I've been missing the Sundays lately, but there's nothing I can do about it. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Take care now.